We learned in one of the previous lecture that a full node keeps a complete and up-to-date copy of the blockchain, and a full node also validates and propagates transactions in block. So when a transaction hits the network, it is then aggregated into a block by a mining node, and that block is then append to the current blockchain. Therefore, over time, the size of the blockchain keep growing. But what happens with the transactions that are not yet included into a block? A full node also stores those transactions in something called a mempool or a memory pool. So on the blockchain, we have the confirmed transactions are inside a block, but the unconfirmed transactions are stored in the memory pool, also commonly known as the mempool. That means these are transactions that was submitted to the network. They might be technically valid or confirmed, but are yet not included into a block. As long as a transaction is not included in a block, it's not a confirmed transaction. You can think of it like you making a bank transfer to somebody, but the money has yet not been booked from your account. So the memory pool is just a small database of unconfirmed or pending transactions which every node keeps. And all transactions in the main pool are pending, and you should not trust a transaction until it is included in a block. There are some services that allows you to visually see what transactions are in the mempool. So the most popular one is the page mempool.space. When you go to mempool.space, you will see over here on the right side, you have so these are the blocks that are already mined. So if you click on one of these blocks, for example, let's do that. You can see this is the block. These are the transactions. And the size of these squares is the amount of fee that the person pays in the transaction. It's not the size of the Bitcoin or whatever. For example, you can see over here that the fee was $27 and the Bitcoin was 0.7073 Bitcoin, something like that. Over here, this one is a smaller one. The fee is only 74 cents. If you then click on any of the transactions, you will see that the transaction has one confirmation. That means that the transaction is now included in only one block. If you then click on this one, for example, you will see that the transactions in this block have four confirmation. This is because since we have four blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, therefore we can say that the transaction in these blocks are already confirmed 4 times. So if you click on that, pick any transaction, you receive 4 confirmations, for example, because it is included in this block. This block is linked with this block, and this block was also linked with this block, and so on and so on. So the older a block, the more secure it is. So this is one page that you can use to see the content of the mempool. Over here we have input and output. We'll learn about that later. This is the next block. This is going to be probably be mined on the network. So if you click on that and pick any transaction, you will then see it is unconfirmed. That means this transaction is still inside the mempool. So the transaction is yet not mined by the Bitcoin miner. It's yet not part of a block. So as long as the transaction is not part of a block, it is an unconfirmed transaction. And down here you can see how the blocks are entering or leaving the mempool. There's another page that has a nice visualization of new transaction entering the mempool. For example, it's this page, bitfit.live. It displays the transaction in a nice way. You can see new incoming transaction. All of these squares falling down are new incoming transactions. And over here, if you click on one, you will see the transaction is still unconfirmed because this page shows you the mempool. What I really also like over this page is that you can hover with your mouse over a transaction and it shows you nice information. So you can see the size of the transaction, meaning how much data is included in that transaction. And you can also see the value of the Bitcoin included in the transaction. In this case, this is a transaction over $0.4 million. For example, you can see this was a transaction for over 4,000 Bitcoins, which is quite nice one. Let us take a look at this one. It's a nice transaction. So with a total value of almost 4,300 Bitcoins, and in dollar, oh, it's gone. So you can see, so these are two nice pages that you can use to always check the mempool. That means when you make a Bitcoin transaction and you want to know the status of your transaction, you can always go to the mempool.space, or you can go to Bitfit and enter your transaction ID over here or over here, and then it will show you your transaction. And because I'm also running a full node, I can see what are the transactions available in the mempool right now. So I can open the console inside my Bitcoin node and enter a command such as get raw mempool, and this is going to return a list of all the transactions that are currently not recorded in a block. So I can pick any of the transactions and go to mempool.space to get more information about the transaction. And you can see it is an unconfirmed transaction. I can see when it was submitted to the network, when it's estimated to be included in a block. So it's estimated that this transaction will be part of this block. I can also pick a different transaction. So I can open this, scroll down here, pick this one. And now let's go to Bitfit to see what's the state. It's also an unconfirmed transaction. So all these informations that you are seeing over here are also available directly on a Bitcoin node, but the data is not so nicely structured as over here. For this transaction, I can show you how you can query that from a Bitcoin node. If I go back into my Bitcoin node, I can do something like get raw transaction, enter the transaction ID, and then hit enter. Now you can see we have much more information about the transaction. So what a page such as mempool.space or Bitfit Live does is that it runs a Bitcoin node and it receives transactions from the network, and it can query more information and display it to us in a nicely way.